I love this place. This is Liverpool's Walker Art Gallery. I used to spend hours in here as a kid, hundreds of beautiful pictures. But these are just the tip of the iceberg. The vast majority of public art is hidden from view. It's estimated that 80% of the national collection is either in storage or in places it just can't be seen. Today I'm going to find out why that is, and at the same time unearth some fantastic paintings that haven't been seen for a very long time. This is art on the move. Works coming out of storage to take their bow in a revamp of a popular gallery at the Walker. The room, which is dedicated to British art, is just days away from reopening its doors. For curator Laura McCulloch, these are nervous times. A lot of preparation has gone into the new look, and it needs to be right.
Yeah, no, that looks good.
I'm getting a sneak preview, not only of the gallery, but also of some paintings which have been hidden for a long, long time. So, Laura, this is a permanent
It is, it's
gallery.
a permanent gallery.
Yeah, I remember this.
You do, but it looks very different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About every 10 years we try and redo a permanent gallery. They get tired, we've moved pictures around, there's holes or shadows where one's been, the other one's gone in. Yeah. So we've completely gutted the gallery, took all the paintings out, stripped all the walls, painted.
I was going to say, because what about the pictures themselves? Because some of them I remember, but some of them I don't.
Yeah, some haven't seen the light of day for years. So it's really exciting because as we've refurbished, we've suddenly wanted to get things out that we haven't been able to have on before. And there's more paintings on all the sides. We've got the War Artist section. This painting here hasn't ever been on permanent display as far as I know. It's by Stephen Bone, who was an official war artist. He was mainly with the Navy, so it's called the 4-inch guns. This is the guns on the boat. And it's one of the tiniest pictures going into the gallery, but I love it.
Why is that name familiar, Bone?
Because his father was the first ever official war artist.
His dad was a war artist?
Yeah, Muirhead Bone was the first official war artist in the First World War.
Father and son?
Yeah.
Wow.
Quite special.
Artists around the globe have always painted war scenes. But in Britain, in the Second World War, around 30 were given full-time commissions, while hundreds of others were paid for work they submitted. Between them all, they captured the action on the front line and also showed how Britain was coping at home. Well, I like this. What's this one? Tell me about this one.
This is Albert Richards, who is the Liverpool artist, who was the youngest official war artist and sadly died in action, aged only 25. So there's a really poignant story, and in some ways is one of our hidden artists because we haven't had his works on permanent display before. So this is great. It's really good to be able to tell the story of the Liverpool boy, Liverpool hero, as it turns out.
Why has this been hidden? Why have you been hiding?
It's just not been enough space to have it up. And so I'm really pleased to be able to have that up now because I think it will really bring people in. People are fascinated by war.
Do people know about Albert Richards?
Not really, no.
I've never heard of Albert Richards. And
so this is why it's so exciting because he would have been really good. He would have been a household name had he lived. And so I'm pretty certain he would have been as big as, say, Lucian Freud.
Gosh. Are there any more Albert Richards?
We've got his self-portrait in the gallery, actually, and it's just over here.
So this is him?
This is him,
I wasn't expecting...
This is a weird, weird picture, and it's very surreal. But he did actually see surrealist works in the Walkers when he was a student at Wallasey Art School, and you can definitely see the influence. I mean, all these strange things that are going on around the corner.
This is him, this is what he looked like.
With glasses on, though, and I don't think he did wear glasses.
Blue
so I
glasses,
think those are for effect.
So what date will this be? How old is
1939. He's 20 in this picture.
He's 20?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they're all waiting for war. So this strange atmosphere in the picture, actually, this unsettling atmosphere, you can understand it.
Well, hence the parachutist.
I think so.
Because that was the concern, that was the worry, you know, it's going to come from the sky.
Yeah.
And the clenched fist salute. This was the salute of the International Brigade in Spain. This is the anti-fascist salute.
And he's lived through all that. So you can see how life and death, which is what this painting conjures up, is very much in his mind.
Yeah. Richard's paintings have got me hooked, and I want to see more, which means a trip to the Walker's storeroom. In all my visits, I've never been in here. This is the art you don't see, hidden away, waiting for its moment in the spotlight.
So this is the art gallery's smaller picture store, and there's just hundreds of hidden gems down here.
Concealed on one of the racks is another Albert Richards painting, one which hasn't made it into the new gallery.
This work is Holland Cold Holland, and this is when Albert is an official war artist. This is June 44. And actually it's interesting because it's not a military piece, it's the civilians that he's focusing on here. And it's called Holland Cold Holland because that winter was incredibly cold. These are the people of Holland who are absolutely destitute. They've been brought to their knees by the war with Germany. And what they're doing is illegally picking up coal. But I love the sense of perspective.
Yeah, strange perspective.
Really strange. And that idea of the surreal and... Yes, he's recording what's going on, but he's also making an aesthetic picture of it. And so that idea of being a war artist, you could take a photograph to record things, but actually the government were interested in having that aesthetic, more emotional, I think, response to war.
Well, what a shame there's not enough space to see this one as well.
The Walker Art Gallery has a collection of around 12,000 works of art, and we can probably only physically display at any one time around 20% of that collection. Also, watercolours and drawings can't be exposed to light continuously without affecting their condition. So we have to make decisions about what we can show at any one time, both caring for the work of art but also thinking about the space that we have available in the gallery.
Sometimes works just aren't in good enough condition to go on display. All galleries carry out conservation work to get items looking their best. At the Liverpool Conservation Centre, another Albert Richards painting is receiving some TLC.
The painting itself is a Seacombe ferry in wartime, and the reason why it's come into the studio is because we're cleaning the glass, giving it a hoover out and making it ready for display. Conservation is such an important part of looking after the work. Without the different treatments available, works can deteriorate quite badly.
And I found another Richards painting, not a million miles from the Walker. This is the building next door, Liverpool's World Museum. Not all hidden art is in storage. Some of it's actually on view, just not to you and me. Look what's in here. And Albert Richards on an office wall. Here he is right on the front line. Holland, 1944. The Allied advance. This is the flooded mass. Beautiful. Disturbing. It's a wonderful story. The Liverpool lad who painted the war. And it's a story that's come alive for me, thanks to a few hidden paintings. Albert was one of a select band of artists in the thick of battle, but others were working closer to home. Their mission? To illustrate how war shapes lives, wherever you are. While Albert Richards was away fighting for king and country, painting everything he saw on the front line, war art of a very different kind was being produced in Manchester, inspired by the man who ran this place, the Manchester Art Gallery. Lawrence Hayward was the gallery's first ever director. He ran it from the start of the First World War to the end of the Second. And in that time, he completely transformed it. One of the last things he did helped illustrate his genius. This is the Manchester Gallery, which tells the story of this great city. Pride of place goes to 2 oil paintings which describe the intense war effort that took place here during World War II. Turns out, though, that they're just a small part of Lawrence Hayward's grand plan.
Despite the worst time Manchester has experienced since the outbreak of war, the people's chins are up.
Manchester came under relentless attack during the war because it was such a crucial centre of industrial activity. Firms changed production to help with the war effort. Workers, mainly women, churned out armaments and engines, tanks and aeroplanes. Hayward knew that history was being made on the gallery's doorstep.
Lawrence Hayward rounded up some 16 artists from Manchester, and his great idea was that he would go round the various factories and research laboratories that were engaged in the war effort and say, here's an artist I found. I would like you to commission this artist to record what you're doing for the war effort, and then when they've made the work for you, you can donate it back to the gallery. And that's exactly what happened. He was a very canny man.
This fabulous painting of the Metropolitan Vicar's works in Trafford Park has been on regular display. The artist is Charles Cundall.
He was born in Stretford, so he was a local lad, and he was trained at Manchester School of Art. He was particularly adept at crowd scenes, so he was an obvious choice for Lawrence Hayward when he was looking for artists to do this work.
The second oil painting is by another local artist, Harold Workman.
He came from Oldham, but his painting is of making camouflage cloth that Simpson and Godley, who were actually known at the time for their calico printing. But like many of those factories at the time, they had to be turned over to the war effort.
Is this all that's left? Where are the rest?
Mostly in our stores, and some of them have not been out since they were all shown as a group at the end of the war.
Another store, another treasure trove of hidden art, and more oil paintings from Hayward's war effort collection. Well, here it is.
And here is one of the other paintings by Charles Cundall. This picture here, Paul, is of the Avro Lancaster bombers being made in the AV Row works at Woodford. The Lancaster, of course, has become an absolute classic of all time.
It's iconic.
You know, this is a great painting recording that moment. Without the Lancaster bombers, we probably wouldn't have won the war. It's an extraordinary scene.
So when was this picture last exhibited?
I think the last time this was actually out was in the show that Lawrence Hayward did in 1945.
Oh, look at this.
Isn't this an extraordinary scene here? This is a loading gantry for Pluto, which was pipelined under the ocean. This was an amazingly inventive scheme to take fuel all the way under the channel to the troops fighting in Normandy. And Glover's was a Trafford firm. You know, it's a tribute to, you know, Lawrence Hayward's vision in actually getting these artists to go out to places that they wouldn't normally have, you know, gone down to Trafford Park.
So what do we know of Keith Henderson?
He was quite a popular painter in the 1930s, not very well known now, but he was a great friend of the director Lawrence Hayward, as you can tell from all the correspondence in the file. But unfortunately, there's no correspondence about this particular painting.
As well as the oils, Hayward's collection also included sketches, watercolours and lithographs. Perhaps the most stunning is this drawing of the Dunlop Barrage Balloon Factory by Sir Muirhead Bone, Britain's first ever official war artist, and father of Stephen Bone, whose work we'd seen in the Walker. Our next stop is the gallery's weird and wonderful out-of-town store. There's still one old painting from Hayward's collection which I haven't seen.
Here's the other missing and forgotten war work. And this is by A.S. Finlayson at the Ford Motor Works.
So this is when Fords went over from making car parts to making aero engines.
Yeah, turned over to the war effort. I love the little details, like the little lights here, like little library lights, a little glow,
Yeah.
so that when it,
So I say it could be a night scene.
Yeah. He must have had, very good access in the factory to actually study all of these pieces in some
He's right in amongst it. Look.
Yeah, yeah.
And what about Finlayson himself? What do we know of him?
We know almost nothing at all about Finlayson. There's nothing in the artist files, there's no correspondence. So we've only got one letter written in 1976 to the Ford Motor Company saying, do you know anything about A.S. Finlayson? Because we don't. And there's no reply.
Well, this ain't bad for a storage room. How many pictures are in here?
I think there's about, looking around, I think there's about 200 paintings in this particular store.
This place is a real eclectic Aladdin's cave. All kinds of eras, all kinds of styles side by side. And look what I've found. Our old friend, Albert Richards. All of these hidden paintings intrigue me. On the surface, they illustrate one of the biggest stories of the 20th century. But underneath, they all hold their own secrets. The lives of the artists themselves. Some of the Manchester painters remain sadly forgotten figures, and all we're left with is their brilliant depictions of the war effort on the home front. But something draws me to the work of Albert Richards. What was his story? How did he get to be Britain's youngest war artist? And was he really a hero? Time for a bit of research. At Birkenhead's Williamson Art Gallery, they claim Richards as their own. It turns out that Albert was born in Liverpool, but spent most of his short life in Wallasey.
At the age of 15, he went to Wallasey Art School because that was his major talent. So he stayed at Wallasey Art School until shortly before the beginning of the war, when he got a scholarship to the Royal College of Art and went to London.
Within 3 months, Albert was called up. He joined the Royal Engineers and began painting his experience of war. Some of that art has found its way back to Birkenhead.
We've got a couple of oil paintings, a large collection of student work that was done mostly at Wallasey School of Art, and a small group of watercolours, including a couple of wartime ones. The art school in Wallasey and what was then Wallasey Technical School each received a large watercolour by Albert Richards as a token of his wartime work. We've got an oil painting called The Process of Time, which is one of the surrealist oil paintings that he did shortly before he went to London.
This painting, of a searchlight battery on the River Mersey, is on loan from the Imperial War Museum. Albert painted it while he was home on leave in 1942.
Because he died so young, his reputation was never as remarkable as it ought to have been, really, for a person of his talents. But I do think that he is acknowledged by local people as a major figure, and a major figure of lost potential as well.
This is the work of an unknown student who achieved national recognition as a war artist, but in all that time remained a soldier as well.
there's only ever been one national exhibition of Albert Richards' work, and that was held at the Imperial War Museum back in 1978. Fortunately, the BBC produced a brief report.
The remarkable thing is that in a very brief space of time, Richards managed to assimilate so many influences and made them his own.
The man speaking is Alan Freer, probably our only Albert Richards expert. Now in his 80s, he lives in Manchester. He's the proud owner of several watercolours, as well as Richards' personal scrapbook containing rare photographs. It has to be said, Albert doesn't bear much resemblance to his surreal self-portrait. Alan bought the album and the paintings from Albert's mother, Hannah, shortly before she died.
She knew she'd hatched a swan. She knew that he was a boy or a man of exceptional talents. I think it was Graham Sutherland who said he was the discovery of the war. Well, he had the true instinct of the artist. He was a good colourist. His use of colour was very striking. It was full-bodied. So that arrested you. You know, you felt that he was clinched into his subject matter.
Alan explained that Albert, or Bertie as his mother preferred to call him, had switched from the engineers to the paratroops in 1943, before becoming Britain's youngest official war artist the following year.
It has to be remembered that Albert Richards was primarily a soldier, and that's how he saw himself, a soldier who could paint.
He was also a soldier who became a hero when he parachuted into France in June 1944.
He took full responsibility when he went over to France on D-Day. I mean, he saw the fighting at first hand. When his commanding officers were killed, he was the man in charge.
But his courage and love of painting ultimately led to his death.
He told his mates that he wanted to paint the greatest picture of the war, which was a night scene of the retreating German forces. So he went out and he just lost his way and drove his jeep into a minefield. It was blown up instantly, and him within it.
I head back to the Walker, which keeps a file on every artist and every artwork. Some, including Albert's, are housed in the wonderful old County Sessions Court, and they confirm his remarkable story. A life in 3 folders. Here he is, Albert Richards. Must be 21, 22. And these letters that he was sending to the War Artists Committee, I mean, it's so revealing. He's obviously desperate to become a war artist. He says, "This set of paintings I know are not brilliant, and I feel they're not a true statement of myself or my feelings." Then he goes on to say, "The only subject I see around me is boredom. I do hope that one day I shall get a chance to become a war artist. Maybe this summer I'll send proof of my capabilities. Yours faithfully, A. Richards." And it's also obvious that he was a bit of a hero. This is by a Daily Mail reporter. It says, "Back to paint his war. Artist paratroop leapt on guns." Albert Richards, spearhead paratrooper on D-Day, has taken up his brushes again and is portraying in paint the night battle on which our invasion depended and which his gun helped to win. That's the Daily Mail. And lastly, this is the saddest of all. Parachute war artist is killed. Captain Albert Richards of Wallasey, Cheshire, official war artist with the Second Army, has been killed in action in Western Europe. He was 25. Says it all. And so it's time to reveal some of our hidden paintings to the people who own them, the great British public. we invite Maisie Dwyer and Joan Hibbard to the Manchester Art Gallery stores to see for the first time the painting of the Ford's factory where they used to work.
Absolutely unbelievable. It just looked like that. It was all grey, and wasn't it? All those machines were all grey. I like that painting because I like the way, the colour of those machines and the light just coming over it like that. That, to me, is exactly what it looked like when you walked in.
It is quite good, but I can't just remember seeing anything like that at the factory. You know, not all these men. I mean, they were very scarce. They were all away fighting.
The men that were there were all over 40, which seemed very old to us at 18 and 19. Those were the men that were in charge, foremen, setters, those kind of people. It would be interesting to see those other paintings because we probably all knew someone that worked in those other factories.
A.S. Finlayson's painting has already been moved back to the city centre, in readiness to go on long overdue display.
One of the things we try to do is tell new stories about our works of art, take art that hasn't been seen for many years perhaps, that perhaps the previous generation has neglected. And that's what we're going to do with Lawrence Hayward's collection of paintings of the war effort in Manchester.
Back in Liverpool, the revamped gallery reopens to the public, who are delighted that hidden paintings are now there to be enjoyed.
I think the more paintings that are on view, the better, really. I mean, the idea that all this stuff is stashed away in warehouses and vaults and so on is quite depressing.
You can understand the need to conserve them and perhaps protect them, particularly watercolours. But it's also important to share what is part of our heritage.
Really quite exciting to get an opportunity to see something coming out of storage, seen for a first time.
If it belongs to the nation, it should be seen by the nation, really.
I love the Albert Richards who died when he was 26 in the war, so no, it's fantastic.
It would be great, wouldn't it, if the work of Albert Richards, as well as the artist that painted the Manchester War effort, was always hanging somewhere for us all to see it. After all, we own it. As we've seen, this hidden art's full of surprises. So it's good that our galleries are working hard to let us in on their secrets. Exhibitions are constantly changing because there's so much to show. Good art doesn't stay hidden for long.
When I hold back a tear to make a smile appear, there are thousands of publicly owned paintings hidden from view. Now you can see many of them on the BBC website at bbc.co.uk/yourpaintings.